Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this live Q&A today about the ongoing baby formula shortage. This is a really tough topic for a lot of families out there locally and nationwide. And at Children's, our aim today is really to answer common questions, to discuss safe and unsafe alternatives, and to offer support so that you can make the best, most well-informed decisions for you and your baby. So offering us that pediatric perspective today is pediatrician Dr. Melissa St. Germain. Hi, Dr. St. Germain.
Hi.
I feel like I'm telling you this, but you are the medical director and vice president of Children's Physicians and our urgent cares. And she practices at Children's Physicians West Village Point. So thank you for being our expert today. Really appreciate it. I know you are hearing this from moms every single day, many times.
Tons of questions, yes.
Tons of questions. And if you have a question about the baby formula shortage, we want to hear it. Please put it in the comments below. That's one of the advantages of doing this live. And we will either get to that during the broadcast or we'll answer the questions after our chat. Just to dive in, what is causing this? How did we get here to this point?
Yeah, there were a few different things that have happened in the last few months that have made this infant formula shortage such a crisis right now. First, the Abbott formula plant in Sturgis, Michigan had to shut down and had to recall a bunch of their cans of formula. There was concern that there was contamination in that factory that may have made some babies sick. So they pulled all of that. Abbott makes Similac. So they pulled all of that possibly contaminated formula off the shelves, which obviously decreased our supply a lot. And then we're going through supply chain shortages, shipping shortages, the same thing that we're seeing in lots of other different areas. We're experiencing that with the baby formula as well. The other thing that's contributed to this is almost half of infant formula is purchased through the WIC program, the Women, Infants, and Children program. And those programs, which are run by the states, all have their own sort of contracts with different formulas. And so this disruption with the Abbott plant really disrupted a lot of those contracts as well. And so it's been harder for some families to get formula through WIC too.
So what is your best advice for these families who cannot find their baby's formula on the shelves? They go to one store, it's not there. They go to another store, it's not there. What are you telling them?
Yeah. So first, I want to reassure people because I've seen some pictures of shelves where all that they have is Similac. And I think people are nervous about using Similac. Every can of Similac that's now available on the shelves is safe. It's all been, they've been tested. They did the recall that they needed to do. So I think sort of it gets that damaged goods sort of look to it, but really all of the formulas that you can find are safe and are effective for your baby. So if your baby's on a milk-based formula, so that would be Similac, Enfamil, Good Start, some of those sort of the run-of-the-mill formulas, most babies can switch between those without any problems. They can switch from Enfamil to Similac or from, Similac to Good Start or anything like that. And store brands are just fine. Those are generally made in the same factories that the name brands are made in. So whatever you can find if your baby's on a milk-based formula is probably going to be fine. They may have a little bit of digestive discomfort with any kind of formula switch. So you may have a few days of stools looking kind of goofy or your baby spitting up a little bit more. But most babies on those regular milk-based formulas are going to do fine. Mm-hmm. Now, the tricky part comes with those more specialty formulas, the more broken down formulas. And so some parents may have to do some education with themselves about what other formulas are similar to that. So if you've got a baby that's been on what we consider a partially broken down. This is as in the weeds as I'm gonna get today, because I think this is important information for some of these families. So if you've got a partially broken down formula, or what we call a semi-elemental formula, that means it started as a milk base, but they've broken it down about halfway to make it easier for your baby to digest. That would be like Alimentum, Nutriamogen, or Progestamel. So those three are kind of equivalent, and you can, if you've baby's been on Alimentum, you can probably do Nutriamogen and vice versa. There's some really broken down, or what we call elemental formulas, and those you can switch between too. Those are Neocate, Elecare, Alpha Amino, and Pure Amino. So if your baby's on one of those in that category, they can probably go to a different one in that category. If your baby's on one of these elemental or semi-elemental formulas, you've probably already worked with your pediatrician on finding the right one. So please call your baby's doctor with any questions about that. But for those babies that are on the regular milk-based formulas, again, they're probably going to do okay with any of those brands.
So you mentioned, like, top tip, call your baby's pediatrician. Are pediatricians offering formula samples?
A little bit. So we do, most doctors' offices will get some formula samples. We tend to get more of those specialty formula samples because those are usually ones that you've had to have a conversation with that family while they're in the office. You want to give them something to get them started. So we tend to have more of those. We don't have a ton of any. We're not hiding any pallets in the back, I promise. And so
Right.
We may have a can or two if somebody's really in dire straits or really desperate, but we don't have enough for everybody. So again, it's definitely worth a call to your pediatrician. And I know that even within children's, we've been doing a lot of like calling around and scrambling, and does this office have it, and trying to really help any way we can, but we don't have a ton.
Okay. You mentioned being desperate, and it might, if you need to feed your baby, it can feel desperate. And sometimes when we feel desperate, we can make decisions that are well-intended but ill-informed. And so I kind of have a lightning round here for you of do's and don'ts. Like, is it okay to buy formula online from overseas?
So it is okay to buy formula online. I would hesitate to buy it from overseas because previously the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, which regulates all the baby formulas, has restricted access into the country from formulas from overseas because they don't test it. Now there's some legislation going through that will help with that. The FDA is doing some testing on some formulas from Europe and other places and will allow it into the country. And once it's here, that is totally fine. My hesitation would be if you're buying from kind of a shifty online source that hasn't been following the shipping regulations up to this point, you can't guarantee that they've been following the other regulations either, like making sure it stays clean and safe and at temperature and all of those things. So there is a risk with buying it from some of those third-party online vendors where you're not really sure where it's been. It might have been stuck on a shipping container for the last 6 months in the ocean at 100 degrees. Who knows? And so again, they're working on some legislation to make that safer, but there is a risk associated with that.
And if you're just joining us or catching this, we're talking about the ongoing baby formula shortage and do's and don'ts and safe alternatives. Another question, is it okay to use expired formula? Oh, it looks like it expired 5 days ago.
5 days ago is probably fine. So over time, the ingredients in that powder will start to break down. And now an unopened expired can and I hate to even give a date, but if it were me, and it was within the last couple of weeks, it's probably okay. If it's been sitting on the shelf for months, there's a higher risk that there could be some bacterial contamination in there, and there's a higher risk that some of the ingredients have degraded and won't be as healthy for your baby.
Is it okay to mix different formula brands? So like, I got a half empty one here, I got a half empty one here. Can I just mix them all together?
Yeah, absolutely. Just make sure, on the back of every can, it's going to tell you how to mix it. Most regular formulas are 1 scoop to 2 ounces of water. But if you're using 2 different cans, just make sure that they both have the same ratio that you're supposed to be using of powder to water.
Is it okay to put more water, kind of dilute the baby's formula to make it last longer? You were talking about the ratio. Never. Never water down the formula. And the reason is these formulas are created with very certain ratios of nutrients. It's kind of the same reason you can't really make your own baby formula at home. When you're feeding an infant, everything that's going into that baby's nutrition is coming from you, right? So when you give them a bottle of formula, that is designed to have the right amount of sodium, the right amount of sugar, the right amount of potassium, all of those things in it. And so by watering that down, you're giving them less sodium, less potassium, less sugar. And so that's not how the body's digestive system is designed to process those ingredients. So we do see babies on watered down formula end up in the hospital with
salt levels that are too low and potassium levels that are too low. So it's really, really risky. I wouldn't ever dilute your formula.
You also mentioned the making it yourself, and one on social media included, okay, evaporated milk, water, Caro syrup, whatever homemade concoction. You said it, not safe.
Right.
People can end up in the hospital. I guess, can you just again kind of talk about the risk of like making your own?
Yeah, and that's kind of the same idea. If you don't have the exact right ratio of salt, potassium, sugar, protein, and fat, then you can really put your baby at risk there. And sometimes you don't notice the symptoms of low salt or hyponatremia until your baby's pretty sick, and it can be hard to get them back on track. So I really, really would discourage anyone from trying to make their own.
Is it safe, again, more lightning round, is it safe to give a baby cow's milk instead of baby formula? And is plant-based milk a safe option?
Yeah.
So cow's milk, plant-based.
Yeah, milk. So cow's milk for older babies, 9 to 12 months of age, who are already eating salads, who are already eating a good variety of foods and drinking some water and things like that, a little bit of cow's milk is probably going to do okay. Now, it's not a great solution. You should still try to look for some formula and get what you can. But for those 9 to 12-month-old babies who are eating foods, it's less risky. For babies under 6 months, it's very risky. Cow's milk in its whole form is irritating to the gut. So in addition to all those salts and potassium and things that aren't in it, it's also a little bit irritating to the gut. So babies who take cow's milk are more likely to have some intestinal bleeding, which again, you can't always see. Sometimes it's microscopic blood, but that's more likely to cause low iron and anemia, which is low red blood cell count in babies. And so it's pretty risky to give cow's milk to babies under 6 months. Between 6 and 9 months, I would say I hate to always say call your pediatrician, but I think that's babies in that 6 to 9 month range. Some of them are eating tons of solid foods and would probably do okay. Some of them are still completely dependent on that formula, aren't really eating, and those would be babies you wouldn't want to put on cow's milk too soon. Plant-based milks are usually a lot lower in calorie, a lot lower in protein and fat than cow's milk. So for most babies, that is not really a reasonable option. Now, there's a bunch of new ones, and I feel like I have to educate myself every time I go to the grocery store because there's a new plant-based alternative, and some of them are more designed for younger kids with higher calorie and protein counts and things. But in general, that's probably not a safe thing to do without talking to a dietitian or your pediatrician.
And are you finding parents trying to like get into the solid foods faster because of this? Like they're like, when can we start?
Yeah.
When can we avoid this issue?
Yeah. And so for most babies, you can start doing a little bit of solid food between 4 and 6 months. Now, breastfed babies don't need any solids until they're 6 months old. But between 4 and 6 months, most babies are developmentally ready to start doing some of those solids. By 6 months, most babies are doing more solids and starting to introduce those foods into their diets.
Now, this is a question that has to be asked. I'm pretty sure I know your answer. Is it okay to feed a baby another type of drink like juice?
That would never be a good idea. Yeah, no, but I'm glad you brought that up because I do think sometimes, if your baby's hungry and you don't have anything else to give them, but really juice is empty sugar calories, and again, could throw off those sodium levels and could really put babies at risk. So babies between 9 to 12 months who are eating foods can also have a little bit of water, but really introducing juice or any other sugary liquids before a year is not recommended.
Bad idea. Can you freeze formula for later? Is that?
I don't think any studies have ever been done on that, so there's no recommendations on it.
Okay. People, want to help. They want to help. And so this kind of goes to that in this next question. Is it safe to share breast milk locally? To say, hey, feed a baby someone else's breast milk. I have breast milk to spare. What about turning to other moms for that?
Yeah. So if it's your best friend and you know their entire medical history, or you feel comfortable, they feel comfortable sharing that with you, that would be less risky than getting on a Facebook group where it's someone that you don't know. There are infectious diseases that can be passed through breast milk, like hepatitis and HIV. And there are substances that can be passed through breast milk, like some of the drugs and pharmaceuticals that we do not want in newborn and infant body systems. And so without going through a reliable source for that, it's hard. I mean, there's no easy way to test the breast milk and make sure that there's no hepatitis or no cocaine in that system, right? And so again, that's pretty risky. Now, there are some milk banks that test the milk and then pasteurize it so to prevent any bacterial contamination. There aren't any in Nebraska. And even those ones that exist are very expensive. And so it's generally not something that's going to be a realistic probability for most moms who are looking for something to feed their babies.
Are there any notifications or services available you're aware of where when a new shipment comes, you can get alerted? Is that a thing?
Not that I know of. Now, I know the WIC offices have been really vigilant about trying to at least educate their own staffs about where to find formula. And so I know I heard from one in one of the area WIC clinics that they're going out every week or a couple times a week and taking pictures of store shelves and trying to share that information with their staff so that when families call, they can help sort of direct them. The big box stores where everybody shops, they're going to get more in, but it's going to go faster, right? And so sometimes you might have better luck shopping at some of the smaller stores that may not have as much traffic going through them. And so thinking a little bit bigger, what other resources you have available in the area, letting family and friends know to kind of keep an eye out for you and pick up a can or two if they can find it, are good ways to help find some extra.
Yeah, you need a lot of eyes and ears out there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important to say on this topic that, children supports mothers and babies, period. We support mothers and babies breastfeeding. We support mothers and babies who are feeding on formula. I wanted to ask, because I imagine maybe you were ready if you were breastfeeding and you were ready to incorporate formula, or, kind of on the fence. Are you seeing moms breastfeeding longer because of this?
Yes.
And what kind of support is there for moms who are like, this is really hard. I'm going to be doing this longer than I thought. I need help.
Yeah, it is hard. And some of those, especially if you've already got it in your head, like I'm ready to be done. And then you have to kind of take a step back, which is sort of the story of having a newborn, right? Is like you have a plan and then your newborn changes the plan. But we do have lactation consultants available through Children's. They do in-person visits, they do telehealth visits, and your pediatrician can get you hooked up with those, because you probably will have questions if you change, what you thought your feeding plan was going to be. And they're happy to help answer those questions about things you can do that'll help increase your milk supply if that's a concern and things like that.
Mm-hmm. So, we wish we didn't even have to talk about this topic. We wish this wasn't so real and impacting so many families, but it is. That said, we want to think hopeful. Are there any developments? What are the latest developments that kind of can encourage us that, okay, this might be getting better?
Yeah.
What do you know?
There's a lot going on at the federal level. So just within the last week, there's been a bill introduced in the House. President Biden, I think, signed 2 bills over the weekend that would, one aimed at increasing availability or shipping of formula from other countries. So like I said, formula from Europe that the FDA can ensure is safe, bringing that into the country. And then also dedicating some funds to make sure that we're producing as much formula as we can. And I know that the formula manufacturers have committed to doing that and switched over some of their product lines so that they can make more formula and less of some of their other products. And so I do think that there's definitely steps being taken a lot of different ways to help increase availability. The other thing I was going to say about WIC is that, like I said, it used to be pretty limited. If you had WIC, you could only get certain types of formula. Most of those rules have been relaxed and completely sort of paused. And so at the current time, at least in Nebraska and Iowa, I can't necessarily speak for other states, but at least in those 2 states, if you have WIC, you can pretty much purchase any formula that you can find.
Okay. Little hope there. In the meantime, what is your final advice or encouragement for moms and babies out there kind of struggling and really stressed out by this shortage?
Yeah, it's again, babies tend to stress us out in lots of different ways,
Yeah,
and
they do.
this is one more hurdle that I wish that you didn't have to go through. But I do think it's going to get better. I do think you know, there are lots of things we're doing to try to help. So please, if you need additional assistance, please call us, and we'll do everything we can to help make sure that your baby gets the food that they need and the nutrition that they need.
Yeah, that's number one. Thank you, Dr. St. Germain, so much for sharing your expertise, your time, and thank you guys for watching today. Take care.